We cannot let any of our nation's flags be appropriated by hoodlums, hooligans, fascists. The Jewish community felt under tremendous attack. It was under attack. I think that it's right that parliamentarians scrutinise the provisions, the rules around the Crown Estates and that arrangement.
Hello and welcome to this special edition of Talking Politics with me, Robert Peston, and today I'm interviewing the Deputy Prime Minister David Lammy, and what we're going to discuss are the benefits and risks of using artificial intelligence in prisons and in the probation service. I'm going to ask him how he felt when he was booed by the Jewish community in Manchester after those appalling killings, what his views are about the proliferation of St George's flags everywhere, and whether he thinks Prince Andrew should leave that mansion. Deputy Prime Minister, we've just seen Justice Transcribe in action. You've said you're going to roll it out to 1,000 probation officers. That's about 10% of the workforce. When is everybody going to have it?
Well, it's my intention to get it out to the whole of the probation service in Britain over the course of the next year. This is a period where we are increasing our probation staff across the country. It's a period where, as a result of the spending review, I'm putting 700 million into our probation services. It's a really, really important part of local communities, rehabilitating people so they don't go on to offending. It needs support. And what you're hearing from frontline staff is this works. This frees people up from the paperwork, from the long hours, to actually spend time with offenders, working on rehabilitating them and getting them to turn their lives around.
It's obviously terribly important, but when you take the human element out, mistakes will creep in, won't they?
Well, no, I think that what probation staff have said to me today is that they're able to edit what Transcribe produces, but actually the technology is sophisticated. It's building on thousands and thousands of interviews and getting better and stronger. And that just liberates them from time and hours to actually spend time with people. And that's what probation staff want to do. These are dedicated professionals. They care about helping people to turn their lives around. They're often working with vulnerable cohorts, young people, women particularly who are vulnerable, and they want to actually spend time face to face. That's what they came into the profession, but over the years bureaucracy has taken over.
This is an in-house development. You were originally piloted with a company actually that the Prime Minister has praised. It's called Beam. It has this product called Magic Notes. Why in the end did you not go with Magic Notes, which was offering its service at cost, as I understand it?
Well, look, there are other transcribe systems across the piece. I think this enabled us to be bespoke to probation, and it also enabled us to be really confident about the data issues that do come up with AI. These are sensitive cohorts of people. The public want to be reassured about this data. Victims of crime want to be reassured about the data. So in the end, I'm just delighted that government has pioneered this, and actually I'm left wanting to ensure that in other parts of government where they're dealing with caseloads, that we are freeing up other public servants. And I'm sure that your viewers can think of, maybe in their own job, teachers, immigration staff are freed up to actually get on with their job on the front line.
No, and that obviously is in terms of getting more from bang for our taxpayers, but getting more productivity for the public service. It's obviously terribly important. But when I talk to UK tech entrepreneurs, they are concerned that this is a government that backs the big American firms, buys enormously valuable, expensive services from America, OpenAI. You've talked a bit about what you're doing with OpenAI. But here is, in the case of Beam, small British tech firm, rejected by justice. And that's one of the things I hear from lots of British tech startups, that the British government is not sponsoring them in the way that, for example, the American government sponsors their American equivalents.
Look, I do accept that there's a balance to be struck here. Britain is leading. In the justice space, we've got law tech, where government does innovate and support innovation within the legal community particularly, and it's important that we support that. I think
But in this case, why, as I say, I'm just back to being were a bit disappointed, and they didn't think it was a fair process.
The judgments over the next little while is how does government, because spread its money not too wide, but actually targeted, so that you do have British capability, and you certainly have sovereign capability, and that is important here. But I think we do also have to sometimes work with larger and American colleagues.
They're always American, is the complaint.
That's why we signed the deal with America when Donald Trump was over. But of course I want to support British business as well. Let's be clear, the innovators sitting behind this technology are British.
Yeah, but but it's not going to be a business that will do well for Britain because it's all in-house.
No, that's not fair, Robert. It's important to support innovators that exist within the public service, as well as innovators outside the public service who are British.
And I want to talk about other innovations. So your predecessor was talking about CCTV-linked technology in prisons, which would analyse prisoners' faces using AI, detect whether they were likely to be more violent. Is that something you're working on?
I am looking, particularly in the high security estate, at the advances that particularly will keep prison officers safe.
So facial recognition.
We have seen horrendous crimes committed against prison officers in the last while. It's important that they feel safe, and therefore where there is technology, whether it's facial technology, I'm looking at how we use that and how cost effective it might be.
Now you're also entrusting to OpenAI, which is obviously the enormous business behind ChatGPT, a lot of very sensitive data. Are you confident that it will be kept secure?
Well, that's the number one question. Because in sensitive areas like criminal justice, health, where you're involved with medical records, people have to know that there is sovereign capability, that this data is here in Britain, that the right protocols exist so that it can't be used or find its way in places it shouldn't be. And that was obviously a guarantee that I wanted to ensure as minister, and I had that in relation to this scheme.
Now, if you forgive me, there's a number of other big things going on in the world which I need to talk to you about. One is you will have seen the demand from 4 of the survivors who have resigned from the Grooming gang's inquiry. They want Jess Phillips, the safeguarding minister, sacked. What would you say to them?
The first thing to say is, over the course of my 25 years in public life, there are really tough, hard, sensitive areas. I've had a lot to do with the Windrush scandal, the Grenfell Tower, where there will sometimes be differences amongst survivors and victims. They're legitimate differences, but differences nonetheless. And we have to be sensitive to that, which is why the Prime Minister says that there is an open door for these families, but he is determined to press on with the inquiry.
Is your view that Jess Phillips is the right person to lead this in a ministerial capacity?
It's one of the privileges of my life to work alongside Jess Phillips, because you struggle to find any member of Parliament with her credibility in terms of supporting women and children who have been subject to violence, death, murder. So she's got an incredible track record. I recognise that there are families who found this very difficult, but I have full faith and confidence in Jess.
Now, one of the other huge issues around is this breakdown of trust between communities. Within your constituency, you have a really important Jewish community. It must have been unbelievably painful and upsetting when you went up to Manchester to be jeered by that group, that very large group of Jewish mourners who'd seen 2 of their congregation killed. How did you feel?
Well, the loss of life in such a horrendous way, I think, was shocking for the Jewish community. It was shocking for our country, and murder of that kind, specific to the Jewish community, has not happened in our country in my lifetime. And I recognise for the Jewish community, parts of the Jewish community in Manchester, the day after the event was very raw, very sensitive.
I mean, I saw you sitting next to Emily Damari, who was one of those taken hostage by Hamas, and I could see that you had a strong emotional relationship with her. So to be booed in those circumstances must have been one of the most horrible things that's happened to you as a politician.
It wasn't pleasant, but obviously in 25 years in politics, you have to have things in perspective. The Jewish community felt under tremendous attack. It was under attack. Amazing volunteers saved lives in that event.
But why do you think they were targeting you? Do you have a sense of what was going on in their heads?
Well, clearly we have seen a rising tide of anti-Semitism in our country. It's entirely unacceptable.
But presumably you don't believe that it's fair to blame you for that, do you?
I represent in Stamford Hill one of our historic Jewish communities. There are tremendous sensitivities and vulnerabilities in relation to rising anti-Semitism and people who would poke and point and name call and peddle hate, never mind also commit crimes against people on the basis of their religion. So I recognise that as an ethnic minority myself. I also recognise that pain and that hurt, and it's not personal to me, but clearly there are demands of government to keep all communities safe, and that is why the Home Secretary has set out that there will be some changes to the way that we marshal and supervise protests, and there's more support that we've got to put in to support Jewish communities who are feeling vulnerable at this time.
Now, we're almost out of time, so I'll try and keep these as brief as possible. When you and I were young...
that was a long time ago.
In my case, it was definitely a very long time ago. One of the things that was upsetting was the way that overt racists and fascists appropriated the flag.
Yeah.
Right? But there are, therefore, people today who, when they see the proliferation of the St. George's flag everywhere, right, painted on bollards, hung from every lamppost, that some people do feel a bit intimidated, a bit uncomfortable about that, because they think that that is a manifestation by particular groups of difference rather than bringing people together. Do you understand why some people are unsettled by all these flags
I
everywhere?
understand it, but I've all been really clear. We cannot let any of our nation's flags be appropriated by hoodlums, hooligans, fascists. So I wear the flag very proudly. Most often when I'm supporting England, you know, in a football game or cricket, and I think it's really, really important. I remember the pride I felt when people like Daley Thompson, Linford Christie, Fatima Whitford would dress themselves in the flag.
Yeah, so that's powerful emotional moments.
That's how I see the flag.
Totally.
I see my Britishness, my Englishness, and I certainly want my children and their peers, whatever their background, to feel as confident about their flag and their country.
Very briefly, a number of MPs have said to me, for example, on the PAC, the Public Accounts Committee, that they are thinking of summoning Prince Andrew to give evidence about how, you know, the circumstances of living in that lodge mansion. Would you back MPs who want to summon him to Parliament?
Well, those are parliamentary committees. There's got to be the appropriate scrutiny of any decision by the Crown Estates. Yeah. So I will leave that to the select committee chairs.
But you wouldn't criticise them for wanting to do that?
As the Prime Minister said, there is a job always for parliamentarians to scrutinise parts of how the state works, and in this case it's the Crown Estates particularly.
I mean, there's an enormous amount of public anger about Andrew. You know, a lot of polling shows that they don't feel he's taken responsibility. Is it appropriate that he lives in this 35-bed or room mansion that is broadly owned by us?
I think that it's right that parliamentarians scrutinise the provisions, the rules around the Crown Estates and that arrangement. I don't know the detail, if I'm honest with you.
But I think British people want him thrown out, which is why I think, many people would say MPs should throw him out if they can.
Well, I think it's right that they scrutinise the circumstances, and they're entitled to do that, but I'll leave it for them.
Deputy Prime Minister, as always, very good to see you.
Thank you.
For this edition of Talking Politics, on the basis of what the Deputy Prime Minister just said about Prince Andrew and that mansion, I think there's a chance Andrew may not be in that mansion for that much longer. See you soon.